never thought a sentence like that would pin itself into my memory, word for word, like it had been carved into the inside of my skull. It was a Thursday, late afternoon, and the shop was half empty, the kind of in-between hour when customers trickle in just to browse, not really to buy. I'd been shelving a box of new titles, paperbacks still smelling of glue and ink, when the bell above the door gave its tired ring. I didn't look right away. That bell usually meant somebody needing directions, or a kid coming in to kill time. But then I heard her voice, low, even, a little hushed, like she wasn't used to speaking where anyone could overhear. "Excuse me, do you have a copy of The Glass Hotel?" I turned, and there she was, not just my coach's wife, not just a name I'd heard during post-game barbecues or sideline chatter, but standing there, framed by the streaked window light, tall, deliberate in her movements, her hair swept back like she hadn't touched it all afternoon, but it still fell in place. She carried herself like someone who'd long since decided how much space she was willing to take up, and everyone around her just adjusted. I fumbled for a second longer than I should have, my hands still on the box cutter. "Yeah, somewhere in fiction. Let me check." She smiled at that, quick, closed-lipped, more polite than warm. But her eyes lingered, like she knew I wasn't as calm as I pretended to be. I walked her over to the right shelf, and for a moment the store felt too quiet. Just the air vent humming overhead, the faint tick of the register clock. She leaned in slightly, reading the spines, her shoulder almost brushing mine. I could smell her perfume, subtle, not floral, more like cedar, or something that reminded me of rain-soaked wood. "There," I said, reaching before she did. My fingers hesitated on the book, then offered it out. Her hand closed over mine before I let go. Not long, not tight, but just enough for me to notice the warmth, the softness. She didn't move quickly, either. She just took the book, slowly, like time had stretched a second longer than it should have. "Thank you," she said, her voice a notch lower. I nodded, suddenly hyper-aware of how close we were. My throat felt dry. She tucked the book under her arm but didn't leave right away. Instead, she tilted her head, studying the shelves as if looking for something else, or maybe avoiding looking at me. "You read much?" she asked. "Sometimes," I said too quickly. Then, realizing how dumb that sounded, I added, "Mostly when it's slow here." She gave the smallest laugh. It wasn't dismissive. It was the kind that escaped before she could stop it. Then silence again, a beat too long. Finally, she turned to go, pausing at the door. Her hand rested on the frame like she'd forgotten something. Her eyes met mine, steady, searching. And then, almost under her breath, words I wasn't sure I was even supposed to hear. "Nobody can ever know." The bell clattered as she slipped out, the door shutting on the last bit of her perfume. I stood frozen in the aisle, the book still warm in my palm where she'd touched it. Customers came and went, the clock ticked on, but I wasn't there anymore. That night, I kept replaying her voice in my head, like I missed something, or maybe wanted something. The second time I saw her, it wasn't by accident. Coach had asked me to drop off a box of equipment at their place. Extra jerseys, practice balls, the usual. It was supposed to be quick. Ring the bell, hand it over, leave. But he wasn't home. She was. "Come in," she said, holding the door just wide enough. Her tone was polite, careful, like she'd practiced keeping things at a distance. The house smelled faintly of coffee, though the mug on the counter was cold. A book lay open on the kitchen table, face down, as if she'd abandoned it mid-sentence. I set the box by the doorway, wiping my palms on my jeans. "Want me to put this in the garage?" She hesitated. Just a flicker, barely half a second, but I caught it. Then, yes, that would help. The garage was tidy but not perfect. Stacks of storage bins, gardening tools leaned against the wall. She followed me in, arms crossed, sleeves pushed back to her elbows. Her nails were short, unpolished. I noticed a faint ink smudge on her wrist, like she'd been writing earlier. I bent down to move some things aside, and when I glanced up, she was watching me. Not curious, more like she'd been caught remembering something. She dropped her gaze quickly, clearing her throat. You must be busy. Classes, practice, work? Busy enough, I said. Then, before I could stop myself, you look tired. Her lips parted just slightly. She pressed them together, exhaling through her nose. That obvious? The question wasn't really meant for me. Still, I shrugged, trying to soften it. Not in a bad way. Just, you do a lot, I guess. That made her laugh. Short, low, almost bitter. She leaned back against the workbench, rubbing her temple. For a moment, the guarded edges dropped. Her shoulders slumped, and I could see it. The weight she carried, the kind she didn't let anyone see. But then she straightened again, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear like nothing had slipped. Thanks for moving that, she said, nodding toward the box. I brushed off my hands. No problem. We lingered there, though. Neither of us moved to end it. The garage felt too quiet. The air between us stretched thin. I found myself noticing things I shouldn't. The fine lines at the corners of her eyes, the way her thumb grazed the edge of her sleeve as if she needed something to hold on to. Finally, she spoke, but softer now. You shouldn't stay long. My husband, he'll be back soon. Her voice caught just faintly on husband. I pretended not to notice, but it stayed with me, twisting in my chest. I nodded, stepping toward the door. Right? Of course. She followed me back through the kitchen. I opened the door, but before I could step out, I felt it, her eyes on me again. I turned. She stood with her hand resting on the counter, knuckles pale, her expression unreadable. She looked at me like she wanted to say something, but didn't, and that silence felt louder than words. It was raining the third time. Not a downpour, just that steady kind of drizzle that makes the streets shine under the lamps. The bookstore had closed early. Leaks in the roof, and I was locking up when I saw her standing outside under the awning, umbrella folded, hair damp around her temples. You'll catch cold, I said, awkward. Because what else do you say when your coach's wife is waiting in the rain like she'd been there too long? She smiled faintly. I like the sound. Besides, I live nearby. But she didn't leave. I unlocked the door again, gesturing. You want to wait inside until it lets up? She hesitated, like always, but then stepped in, brushing rain from her sleeves. The store felt different with her there after hours. Quieter, somehow heavier. I flicked on only one lamp, and it left more shadows than light. She walked the aisles without saying much, fingers trailing along the spines. I followed, not close, but close enough to hear her hum under her breath. A tune I didn't know. You ever feel like you're in the wrong place? She asked suddenly, stopping at the travel section. Sometimes, I admitted, like I'm waiting for something that hasn't started yet. Her laugh was soft but cut short, as if she didn't want it heard. She turned, her eyes catching mine longer than they should have. There was something raw there, something she usually kept tucked away. We ended up at the small counter table in the back, both of us pretending it was casual. I made tea in the chipped mug we kept around, sliding it across to her. She wrapped her hands around it, holding the warmth. I noticed her ring glinting under the lamp, and for a second, it felt like a warning. Then her phone buzzed on the table. A name lit the screen, Coach. She didn't answer. She flipped it face down, her hands tightening around the mug. I wanted to ask why. I didn't. Instead, we sat in the silence, broken only by the patter of rain against the window. I felt it building, the words I shouldn't say, the question I shouldn't ask. My chest tight, my throat dry. She glanced at me, lips parting, like maybe she felt it too. Her hand shifted on the table, fingers barely an inch from mine. I swear I stopped breathing. Something unspoken hung there, fragile, almost within reach. But then she drew in a sharp breath, straightened, and her voice cut the air. "You should go now." My hand was halfway to hers when she said it. And I did. But only my body left that room. I didn't see her for a week after that night in the bookstore. A week that felt longer than it should have. I kept telling myself it was better this way, that I could stop replaying that moment. Her hand almost in reach, her voice cutting me off. But the more I tried to forget it, the sharper it grew. When she finally showed up, it wasn't planned. I was sweeping the back corner of the shop when the bell rang. And there she was, framed by the glass door like the space itself had been holding its breath. We exchanged the usual small words. "Hello, how are you?" But both of us knew they didn't matter. She browsed, though her eyes hardly touched the shelves. I pretended to work, though the broom never left the same patch of floor. Finally, she came up to the counter, resting a hand against the edge. Her nails tapped once, twice before going still. "You've been avoiding me?" I said before I could stop myself. She froze. A long silence. Then, "No. I've just been busy." It wasn't true. We both knew. The air grew tight between us, like the store had shrunk, pulling us closer whether we wanted it or not. I leaned forward, lowering my voice. "What are we doing?" She blinked, her breath catching just slightly. I tried again, softer. "Because this isn't normal. And I don't even know what it is." Her eyes lifted to mine. They didn't waver. They held me there, steady, like she was weighing every word she could possibly say. But none came. Instead, she reached for the book on the counter, one she hadn't even chosen, and turned it over in her hands, staring at the cover without seeing it. Her lips parted, then closed. I felt my chest ache, not from what she said, but from what she couldn't. "You're not happy," I whispered. Came out more like an accusation than I meant, but I didn't pull it back. Her hand tightened on the book, knuckles pale. "Stop," she said, almost too softly to hear. The quiet stretched on, unbearable. Every second I thought she might break it, fill it, give me something to hold on to. Instead, she just stood there, her shoulders squared, her jaw set, but her eyes told another story. I wanted to reach for her. I didn't. I wanted to take it back. Couldn't. The silence pressed down so heavy I thought it might split me in two. Finally, I forced myself to step back. The broom clattered against the wall. My voice shook. "Say something." But she didn't. She didn't say anything. Just looked at me, like she was already mourning something we never even had. I thought she'd stop coming by after that last silence. Thought maybe I'd scared her off. Or maybe she just decided to close whatever door we'd left half open. But then, one late afternoon, she walked in again. No umbrella this time, even though the sidewalks were wet, hair clinging to her cheeks. She didn't browse. She didn't even pretend to. She went straight to the back table where we sometimes sat, pulling out the chair like it was hers. I followed, pulse quick. She didn't look at me at first. Instead, she set something on the table. A folded piece of paper, edges soft, like it had been opened and closed 100 times. "I wasn't going to show this to anyone," she said. Her voice was low, even, but her hands betrayed her. Fingers trembling just enough to notice. I didn't touch it, just waited. "It's from before," she went on. "Before him, before this life. Someone I thought I'd spend forever with." She laughed then, dry, self-mocking. "Turns out forever is shorter than you think." The paper stayed between us like a wall. She pressed it flat with her palm, holding it down as if the words might escape. "He died," she said, so simply it cut through me. "Accident. Years ago." Her voice didn't crack, but her throat worked as she swallowed. "And sometimes when you're here, when you say things or the way you look at me, it feels like him, like he's come back for a second." Her eyes finally met mine. There was no pretending in them now, no guard. Just exhaustion and something fragile. Something that scared me more than her silence ever had. I sat back, my chest tight, because I didn't know what to do with that weight she'd handed me. Part of me wanted to reach across the table, to take her shaking hands in mine. Another part knew that wasn't what she needed. Not yet. I'm not him, I said softly. I know. Her reply was immediate, firm, then quieter. But sometimes I want you to be, just for a moment, just so I don't feel the emptiness. Her words hung there, raw, impossible to smooth over. I didn't try. I let the silence hold us, the rain outside ticking against the window like a clock we both ignored. Finally, she exhaled. A long, uneven breath, as if she hadn't allowed herself to breathe fully in years. And for the first time, she looked at me without fear. The paper never came back out after that day. She didn't mention it again, and I didn't press. But something between us had shifted, subtle, almost invisible, yet I could feel it in the way she no longer kept quite as much distance. She still hesitated when she walked through the shop door, still carried that air of control like armor. But every now and then, I'd catch her letting it slip. The way she'd linger at the counter after paying for a book she didn't even want. Or the way her laugh would trail too long before she pulled it back down into silence. One evening, it was just the two of us again. The rain had cleared, leaving the air outside heavy and damp. She sat at the back table, not even pretending to browse anymore, her hands resting on a closed book like it was an excuse just to be there. I sat across from her. Neither of us spoke for a long while. The hum of the air vent filled the space, steady and low. Finally, she said, "This isn't supposed to happen." Her eyes stayed fixed on the table, not on me. "I know," I answered, "because I did. Because every part of it felt wrong, and yet here we were." She sighed, fingers tracing the spine of the book. "It's not about him. Not anymore." Her words settled deep, and I realized she was telling me something without saying it outright. That the ghost she carried wasn't the only reason she kept her distance. There was more. There was me. I leaned forward, my hands clasped, unsure if I should reach for hers. "So what is it about, then?" Her silence stretched long enough I thought she might leave again, shut it down like before. But she didn't. Slowly, she lifted her eyes to mine, and there was no performance left, no guarded mask. Just her, raw and human and so unbearably close. She didn't answer my question. Instead, she shifted her hand, hesitant, searching, and let it rest lightly on the table between us. Not touching mine, but close enough that the space felt charged, deliberate. I moved first, only halfway, my fingers brushing hers. She didn't pull away. That was it. No declarations, no breaking point. Just two hands finding a middle ground, trembling with the weight of what neither of us said out loud. We stayed like that, side by side in the quiet, the clock ticking above us, the world outside still damp with storm. She didn't say she loved me, but she let her guard down, and that was louder than any "I love you" ever could be. I think about that night more than I should. Not because of what happened, but because of what didn't. We never said the words people expect. We didn't fall into some dramatic scene you'd find in a movie. No promises, no fireworks. Just a hand, trembling slightly against mine, and a silence that finally felt like honesty instead of fear. Looking back now, I realize that's what I wanted all along. Not declarations, not even certainty, just to be seen. And she gave me that. She let me see her too, in the cracks she'd spent years covering up. She taught me something I didn't know I needed to learn. That love isn't always loud. Sometimes it's not even a choice you make. It's the quiet gravity that pulls two people closer no matter how many reasons they give themselves to resist. For her, it was letting go of a ghost she'd carried for too long. For me, it was growing into someone who could hold silence without running from it. That night wasn't the start of some perfect future. It wasn't even the start of something clear. But it was enough. Enough to change the way I saw her. The way I saw myself. People ask me sometimes, what's the difference between wanting someone and truly knowing them? I think it's this: wanting makes you restless, but knowing makes you still. With her, I learned how to be still, how to let the pauses mean something. I don't know what anyone else would call what we had. Maybe it doesn't need a name. Maybe the names are the part that ruin it, make it smaller than it was. All I know is that when she finally looked at me without fear, I stopped being the boy waiting for life to start, and for the first time I felt like I was already in the middle of it. If you're listening to this now, maybe you've had someone like that too. Someone who never said the words but left them all the same, hanging in the way they touched your hand, or in the silence they trusted you to keep. Or maybe you haven't yet. And if that's the case, don't rush it. The best kind of connection doesn't arrive on time. It just shows up, quietly, unexpectedly. And when it does, you'll know. She didn't say she loved me, but she didn't need to. She let her guard down. And in the end, that was everything. What about you? Have you ever had a moment like that, where the silence spoke louder than words?